Skalisky, and I think I've met a couple of you on other mental health minutes or just within meetings, things like that. I'm excited to have you all with us today. We are going to be talking about self-esteem, and specifically self-esteem in our society right now, where we're kind of crawling back out from pandemic and social unrest and those type of things, and why addressing our self-esteem at this moment might be really a great thing for you to do. I am a part-time temporary crisis counselor with Project Renew. Came over from Lutheran Social Services, and I actually now, the reason why I'm only part-time now is that I started a new position as an executive director for a small nonprofit. And so there's been lots of transition in my life, and actually self-esteem has been right at the core of a lot of things that have been going on in my life. And I'm sure the same with all of you, transitioning, working maybe from home, and are you going to go back to the office, and all of those things. It's been kind of a crazy year. So with no further ado, I guess I will get started. All right, so the best definition I could find of self-esteem was the simplest, easiest thing, and it came from, his name was Dr. Morris Rosenberg, and he was at George Washington University. He was the expert, and I say was, he passed away, I believe it was in the 1970s, but he was the expert at sorry, a little technical issue. He was the expert when it comes to all things self-esteem. He created the rating scales and all of those things. But his definition, basic and simple, self-esteem is favorable or unfavorable attitude towards the self. Basic, right? In doing the research for this, there's so much out there on self-esteem. Everybody talks about it. I know it was a very big thing in the 90s that a lot of people were talking about, and now it's transitioned to things more like self-care and things. But if you go and just Google it, you will find articles upon articles upon articles about how important our self-esteem is. So one thing I did find in numerous articles, so I'm not going to cite my source here because it was everywhere that I looked, but that self-esteem is directly correlated with achievement, good relationships, and general satisfaction. And now, of course, most of us know that correlation does not equal causation, and we're looking at what comes first, the chicken or the egg. Do people have good relationships and achievement because they have good self-esteem, or do they have strong self-esteem because they have good relationships and achievement, right? It's both. So the answer is yes. It is both. Our basis for where we gain our self-esteem definitely comes in our childhood. How were we raised? What's our genetic makeup? What kind of relationships did we have with our parents and with peers and with friends? What was our school like? All of those things help us build our base for self-esteem. So self-esteem is actually also fluid. We can definitely be affected by our environment. So if you have a good basis for self-esteem, but you have a really tough work life, you don't have work-life balance, or you have relationships that are abusive, those things can push our self-esteem back down, right? So we have a very fluid movement when it comes with self-esteem. Now, the stronger our main base is, the less those things affect us. Everybody's self-esteem fluctuates. I don't care who you are, if you're Kim Kardashian or if you're Cassie Skalisky in West Fargo, self-esteem is going to fluctuate because we're human beings and that happens. But like I said, if you have a good basis for self-esteem, and if you have a good self-image and self-worth that's strong, you're not going to be as easily affected. So back to basic sociology and psychology classes. When we look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, our self-esteem is affected by that, by where we are on that pyramid. Okay, so you have your physical needs, food, water, shelter. Then you have safety, security. Then you have relationships. Then your self-esteem, and then self-actualization. Okay, so in the world around us, we have all been affected, I would think, by COVID enough where we maybe have had to move down on that hierarchy a little bit in some parts of our life. Especially, even with like the civil unrest that's going on. I mean, I dare somebody to say that they have not had a relationship negatively affected by what's going on in our world right now. And so wherever we are on the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the reason why we drop is because the theory is that in order to climb that ladder or get higher in the pyramid, the lower pieces need to be met. So your food, shelter, clothing need to be met. Then your safety needs to be met, right? And then your relationships need to be met. So if our relationships are being hampered by what's going on in the world around us, we're possibly kind of ignoring that higher up stuff of our self-esteem. If you lose a job and you're concerned about where you're going to, are you going to be able to live in your house or your apartment? Are you going to be able to feed yourself and your family? I mean, then we're looking way at the bottom. So we're not paying any attention to those higher level in the pyramid. Okay, so now things are looking up. We're kind of seeing some lights at the end of some tunnels, right? And we're going to be, I kind of imagine like everybody kind of climbing out from underneath rocks and from around corners and sneaking back out into the world and wondering what's out there. Well, our self-esteem has taken a major hit. Not because necessarily things have happened to negatively impact the self-esteem, but because we haven't been addressing it. We haven't needed it. We've been sitting behind our computer screens and not going into in-person meetings. I had an in-person meeting this morning, and I have to tell you, I was like, whew, this is going to be weird. And it was like I was meeting one person for the very first time, and she's extremely successful, and all of these things. And I'm like, wait, Cassie, you've just been doing research on this for like 2 weeks. Like, take your own advice, right? So I went through and did a couple of exercises to remind myself, and we're going to go through these exercises here in a couple minutes. But it was actually great fun to finally be out in public and to be out meeting people in person and having an actual business meeting, in person at a coffee shop. It was wonderful, but it was slightly scary, and I've been like studying this. So, and I have to admit, I had to use these exercises. So, while I was looking through trying to find something tangible to help, so I can hand something off for you to do, I found lots of pillars of self-esteem, checklists, do these 12 things, all of these kind of things that were supposed to be so helpful. And in my mind, I'm like, they just didn't really, it just didn't feel right for me. I shouldn't have to do so many steps in order to take care of myself and to make myself know that I'm worthy, right? So I went back to when I was younger, and I first started thinking about myself as somebody else. I was really young when this happened. I was in the 6th grade, and there was some prize box in the teachers, you could earn these points and get a prize. And one of the things in the prize box was this little plaque, and it had a cat on it. And it was this cute little kitty cat, and it said, "God don't make junk." And I thought, that's something I would tell somebody else, but somebody's telling me that right now. The teacher put that in there. And this was the 80s, so it was okay. We could talk about God in school and all of that. It wasn't, nobody got in any trouble. But Yeah, so the teacher put it in there because she wanted everybody to know, you know, somebody's going to take this little plaque and it's going to mean something. I didn't choose the plaque, but it really stuck in my mind because I'm like, you know what? If God doesn't make junk or, you know, whatever religion or, you know, higher power you believe in or aspire to or, you know, prescribe by, doesn't make accidents or junk. If everything in the world is precious and we're always telling other people, you are so precious, or you are so, you are worthy, remember that you're beautiful, all those things. Well, I'm a human being too, so they must pertain to me. That's where my thought went when I saw that little plaque in the 6th grade. And it went with me for the rest of my life, reminding myself, I am human just like the next person. Don't be kinder to other people than you are to yourself. Don't be meaner to yourself than you know, I wouldn't say or do bad things, you know, look in the mirror and I say something bad about myself. I wouldn't do that to anybody else. Why do it to myself? So that's kind of the first thought in my process, is that we need to remind ourselves daily that we are just as much human as the next person. So we need to be kind to ourselves if we're going to be kind to other people. So, like I said, I found all of these different lists and things to do, but I just kept going back to the cognitive behavioral triangle. I don't know if any of you know much about that. Some might know a lot and other might like, what are you talking about? Basically, we have behaviors and we have thoughts and we have attitudes. And so you can look at it like you have a behavior that leads to a thought that leads to an attitude, or you can think, I have thoughts that lead to my behaviors that lead to my attitudes, or I've got thoughts that lead to my attitudes to my behaviors. They're all connected. So we got to pick a place to start. And I like picking the thoughts because we can really, really, really impact ourselves if we start with the thoughts. Then our attitudes start to change and our behaviors. And it's reciprocal and it keeps going. So I have a small activity. I'm going to let you all either grab a scratch piece of paper and a pencil or a crayon or marker, or if you want to type it in, you don't need to share this with anybody. This is strictly for you. And so I'm going to ask a few questions, but I'll let you guys, everybody just kind of take a moment to get something to write with, and I'm going to drink some more water here. Okay. We have 4 questions. The first question is, how do you define success when you look at others, when you look at other people? What makes a successful person? I'll give about a minute for each question, I think is fair. Okay, question number 2. How do you define success when you look at yourself? What would you look like if you were successful? How do you know when you're successful? Okay. Question number 3. How do you define worthiness when you look at others? What makes somebody worthy in general speaking? And I'm sure you can guess the last question. How do you define worthiness when you look at yourself? What makes you worthy? If you don't feel worthy, what would it take to get you to be worthy of the world in general? Over time, these answers are definitely going to change in your life. They were different 10 years ago than they are now, I'm sure. Hopefully, hopefully the answers get to be closer than more different. Shame on me for saying that. Most of us do not use the same measuring stick for other people as we use for ourselves. I know that personally, my definition for success for other people is so different than for myself. And same as worthiness. When I define success for other people, when I look to see if someone's successful in this world, in life, I look at how their relationships are with animals, with little teeny children, and with senior citizens or people who are elderly and people who have disabilities. What kind of relationships do you have? That's my success for other people. For a long time with myself, I didn't even realize it, but my success started happening with, am I using my master's degree? What kind of job do I have? Where am I in an organization? Because that was something that was actually taken from me due to family circumstances. And I had children with special needs and I became a stay-at-home mom. And what I was defining myself as wasn't what I was, the same values I was measuring against other people. You know, I have a family member, she's in her 30s, she lives with her parents, and she herself does not feel successful or worthy at all. But in my eyes, animals love her, babies flock to her. She used to work in retail, and you know, anybody who'd walk into the store came straight to her because they were so comfortable with her. You know, people felt good around her, and that was success. But in my mind, I was like, well, you know, I wear sweatpants all day and clean up spit up from little kids, you know, and that wasn't feeling successful to me. I lost my identity. So what I did was I asked myself these questions. Why do I not measure myself the same way as I measure other people? I tell people I work in, behavioral health, and we work on self-esteem, and we work on worthiness, and we work on depression and anxiety and all of those things. Practice what you preach, Cassie. So I started to define myself differently. And I started to realize that when we attach ourselves or define ourselves by something that can be taken away or may go through a change, that's when we lose who we are. So, asking yourself these questions, getting out the measuring stick that you're going to measure everybody by, including yourself, is very, very important. But also, think about who you identify yourself as. Is that something that if your circumstances change, you can take that with you? Well, I guarantee you, my family member, when she is soon to be moving out and getting married and her career's taking off and all these great things, she's taking all of her, what she identifies with her, right? If something happens in the world and she ends up homeless, her apartment building burns down or something, or, tragedy strikes her husband, she becomes a widow, whatever could happen, right? The things that she identifies as a caring, loving person can't be taken away from her. She can give them away, she can lose that, but can't be taken from her. So our jobs can be taken from us. Our homes can be taken from us. Our loved ones can be taken from us. And that hits your self-esteem, right? But if you have those things, if your identity is something stronger than that and you have that good base, yes, it's going to hit and it's going to hurt and we're going to have tough times. But we have a good base, so it's not going to affect us as much, and we're going to be able to rebuild and take those things with us. So I have a really amazing quote, and I did not write this quote. I looked for who wrote this quote, and I found about 5 or 6 different people's names, so I'm not even going to say who wrote it, but I did change a little bit of it anyway, so I added a little bit. So when we're moving on into our new normal lives, whatever those are going to look like, as the civil unrest hopefully is starting to simmer instead of boiling so hard, and our pandemic is hopefully we're on the downturn, and it's things will go back to quote unquote normal. When we're moving back into society slowly, remember that confidence is not walking into a room knowing that you are the best person there, or the smartest person there, or the most good-looking person there. Confidence is not walking into the room and feeling that you fit in with the people that are there. But confidence is walking into a room and not having to compare yourself to others that are in the room, because you know inside yourself that you have wonderful qualities and you have good qualities. I always think of this, I think of when I'm saying this quote or thinking about this quote, I think about walking into one of those big conferences, and you've got all those people sitting there, and maybe you're like me and you're just a little bit late, and everybody turns and looks at you and you're like, okay, am I measuring up the room and seeing like, okay, do my clothes fit in? Do I look, am I fitting the prototype here? Am I smart enough to be here? Those kind of things. No, I'm here in this room. I don't need to compare myself to the other people. because I know that my 4 questions here, I'm holding myself to the same standard as them and not holding myself to a higher standard than them. I also know that I identify myself with things that don't really matter while I'm in this room. I identify myself as a caring person who's a friend. I identify myself who loves her family. Even if my family's taken away, I still love my family. I identify myself as, personally, I'm a Christian. I identify myself as a child of God. People can't take that away from me. I can lose my job, but I'm going to take that with me to the next job, which actually just happened, right? My whole identity just had to change, you know? But I took those qualities with me. So back to the word actual self-esteem as we're wrapping up. Remember that your thoughts link to your attitudes and your actions. They're all linked together. And so if we want to make changes in our world, in our life, if we want to make sure that our self-esteem is gonna withhold the tough times and the good times, keep feeding yourself these positive things. And remember that every single person is a human being and everybody's self-esteem fluctuates from time to time. So we treat other people with kindness. Treat yourself with kindness too. And find something that you identify yourself with that cannot be taken by somebody else. It cannot be taken by the tough times. That's who you are on the inside. Like the difference between joy and happiness. You may not always be happy. You might be angry at times or sad or whatever, but do you have that internal joy that reminds you that there will be happy times again, right? Self-esteem is the same way. It is 12:31. Does anybody have any questions or comments before we log off? I see Jill maybe taking her. There you go. Hello, Jill.
Thank you. Hi. This was really good, and thank you. I'm super enjoying these. This is like the 3rd one I've come to now. Super enjoying them. And there were 3 things that was so back at the beginning, okay. And it was under favorable or unfavorable attitude towards the self, and then it was achievement, good relationships, and then the 3rd thing, which I didn't get written down.
Yes. Let me find my notes. Oh, it was general overall satisfaction, like life satisfaction.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. And Jill, if any of those you missed, you should be able to catch. We record them all too. So.
Okay, that's super. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, anybody else? Well, I thank you for those of you who turned on your cameras so I could see your face. It's so much more fun to be able to see your face and interact a little bit. And PowerPoints are great, but sometimes I think it's just more fun just to chat with people and such. So if you really want a PowerPoint, I can put some together. All right, well, everybody, I hope your afternoon is great. And don't forget to please be kind to yourself.